back to Code with Italians. Today, it's a crossover episode.
That's
we're not doing
the
we're not
Android
doing any
cinematic
coding.
universe.
Too many coders, too many cooks, too many coders. Welcome, Adam. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Fresh off from DroidCon SF as well. So, and we're gonna have stories. I know stories. Today is about stories. There's no code today. We're talking about things, experiences, life, etc.
and people. I think people are gonna
but we're not
be
talking about specific people because that's not nice. Even if it's nice, it's not nice.
No.
So the topic today is the Android community. All three of us have a story to tell, but I think Ivan and I have talked about this with Mark Allison before, and I think people already know or partially know our story. And I think the most interesting part is going to be to hear your story, because I don't really know it either, and I'm curious to learn. As I was saying before we went live, a lot of people have similar stories, but they're all slightly different, and there's always something interesting to learn from everyone's specific path. Before we get started, we have to do the annoying streamer thing where Ivan...
I hope I'm not annoying.
It's annoying as a concept.
So the concept is that we appreciate your support. And you can support us in many ways. One that probably is going to be the cheapest one for you is if you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you can subscribe for free after you connect your Twitch account and your Amazon account. And money that we get from Twitch is going to be from Adam. It's his pocket. Like it's his pocket. It's like
comes right out of my check.
Yeah. It's not Uncle Bezos, Adam, because that's how it works, right? We can produce and give away things like this, and like the stickers that we give away at conferences. But if you want to wear something a bit more important, puede comprar una camiseta en nuestra tienda de ropa. I'll put the link in the description. That was pretty excellent.
You have this nailed in Spanish by now. You know to sell shit in Spanish.
Yeah, this is episode 120 something, so I kind of
3, I think.
Yeah, it started as a joke. I mean, this is something that we always talk about. I always talk about this. It started as a joke. It has been 1 or 2 years. Jesus Christ. Anyway, thank you for the support, and thank you, Adam, for being with us today for another episode that we didn't plan for. Like nothing in, but even if they pay us, we will never be able to script or plan for an episode. So thank you for joining us, no matter what.
As a fellow streamer, I totally get it. I never have a plan. I have an idea, and I figure it out when I get there. Much like how we do as coders in general.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, but don't tell the other people, because they somehow think that we get things and we have everything figured out.
Yeah,
the shit together and things like that.
It's very funny. I have a related story about this really quick. We have an Android intern on my team this summer, and he reached out to me about this problem, and I was like, oh yeah, I know exactly what we need to do. So I start walking him through it. We spent like an hour on this, and towards the end of that hour, we're like almost done. We find this like crucial blocker where I basically had to be like, okay, none of that is going to work. And I was like, I'm so sorry I wasted your time, but also welcome to the real world. Like, that's the most authentic experience I could give you. Because that sometimes you spend an hour and then have to go all the way back. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was building something with Aurelio the other night, and we were working on a function, a Firebase function. Okay, so we get the snippets, people on Stack Overflow. Okay, so the event is gonna fire this, and then we can write everything in the database. And we put everything together, we deploy with command line. Everything is super fancy, and then nothing works. At some point, everything breaks, and at some point we find one person on Stack Overflow and so, oh yeah, they deprecated this method here.
Oh no.
And now being JavaScript being JavaScript, right? So the whole thing just, oh yeah, it doesn't work. You have no, and we looked at each other. I was like, and now what? And he goes, and I was like, I don't know. I have a baby. I need to go. I'm gonna just let me know. I ran away, and he messaged me a few hours later. I was like, they just deleted the function. Okay, so what? Gosh. How do we do it? They were like, no, they deleted it. The method is not there. It's not gonna come back. They removed it from the SDK. So the whole project was like, it's over. I mean, we can't actually build this. So yes, and it was like, this is my life. I mean, think about how many jobs are like this at some point. You just put, and then you're like, no, we can't actually do this. I was like, I felt like a researcher, like after 5 years, realized, nope. It was like, but that's it. You have to be ready, mentally speaking, for this kind of shit, because So, Sebastiano, did you ever happen something like this with your experience in swing?
You mean today, like or or in the past 48 hours?
It's like this week. What's the time frame?
I think so. Today, most of the code I wrote was like compose stuff, so it mostly works. But when I have to write swing code, that happens every time. It's like, oh yeah, I thought that worked that way. No, it doesn't. Sorry.
It hasn't been around long enough to be deprecated yet, but give it a little bit of time. It'll happen.
Oh man. Anyway, so
yeah, I guess speaking of Android, I guess maybe you want me to talk about how I got into this wonderful, wonderful industry in the first place.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I guess before community, that's something we talked about right before we started, is how I got into Android in the first place. So what got me into programming is I basically was like, in high school, I was a math nerd, like many of us, and I had a math teacher that really inspired me, and I told him, like, oh, I also want to be a math teacher. Numbers are and he said, don't do that. He said, you should go apply your math skills. You should look into engineering. And I had no idea what sort of discipline of engineering I would want to do. But at my university, I could start off as like an engineering major, but with like an undecided discipline, because there were certain like core classes that everyone had to take. Like the way our university worked, I had to take a mechanical class, an electrical engineering class, a like computer engineering class. There were like some basics that every discipline had to take. So you could wait like a year and then really decide what you wanted to dive into. And then I realized I really liked sort of computer engineering, loosely related to computer science, but maybe a little more focused on hardware stuff. But as part of that, I had to take a Java class, and I had a classmate who was like, oh, I just found this free course online where you can learn how to make Android apps, which is built using Java, which was what we had the class in. So I was like, oh, that sounds kind of fun. So for a couple of weeks, we both did it together, kind of held each other accountable. He no longer does Android, but I stuck to it. Because I remember one of the first times I like built my app. It was a simple to-do list, but I like unplugged my phone. I went to go show it to someone, and like that was my light bulb moment, that I was able to build something that I could hold on to, and I could like take it and I could show people. And I was just like, that feeling has still never gone away. Like that's why I love working on like product stuff. So I pretty much knew then and there Android was going to be my main focus forever. And then I got a job right out of college working for a marketing company as an Android developer. And I had a coworker there who was like my onboarding buddy, who said like, oh, he got approval from our manager to go to this thing called DroidCon in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never heard of DroidCon. I didn't even know like engineering conferences were a thing. I like had no idea what it was or what to expect. I had also never been to New York City at the time, but it sounded really cool. My manager unfortunately did not have budget to send two people, but I basically said like, can I take the time off and go anyways if I'm willing to pay for it? Um, and he said yes. So that was sort of my first introduction into the Android community, and like that's where everything started for me. I fell in love with it. I was just really there's something really inspiring about being in a room with like hundreds of other people with the same interest from quite literally all over the world. And you just learn so much. And I remember me in particular, I was kind of inspired by the fact that all of these speakers are just like regular people at their own jobs who want to go out and share their knowledge with other people to drive the community forward. And I had already had some interest in this because at this point I had run my own blog and stuff. So I could like relate to, hey, I want to share stuff, but I never realized speaking was an avenue to do that. And after I left that conference, I was just like hooked. I was like, I want to do this one day. I started learning, what I could do. It ended up being like another 2 years before I got my first talk approved. But then it's been sort of easier ever since. I mentioned, like that was also my first time in New York. The conference also showed me how much I love that city, and I also moved to New York a couple of years later and lived there for 6 years. So it was great. That's sort of, I guess that's where I got started. That's my story.
Yeah. So kind of funny that you you got to your first conference without really knowing that it was a thing to begin with.
Yeah.
Uh, I have a similar story, but the fact that I didn't know how anything about it, when I explain why, it's gonna sound even weirder.
Okay.
So, in my technically second job, but it was my first Android job. Um, it was a company that was making smartwatches. We're talking like 12 years ago. And it was doing a smartwatch that ran Android, so you could technically install apps on it. And the owners, the founders, were like, "Oh yeah, we want to build a marketplace where people can publish apps and sell them, and we can do the app store model," because they were very fond of doing everything Apple was also doing. Uh, which then turned out being like Apple did the same product but 10 times better, unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
The
Luck.
Yeah, sure. Or maybe different budgets.
Yeah, it's not the resources. It's never the people. It's
Yeah,
just
a
the luck.
random startup in Italy and Apple work on different play fields.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so they wanted to launch this marketplace, and there was literally nobody had time or wanted to invest into building a community of people creating these apps, right? That was like, you can have a marketplace, but if there's nobody there, then how do you do it? So what I said is like, okay, I know we don't have a budget, but try, if you get me like a very small budget, I'll stretch it as far as I can, and I'll try to build at least awareness of the product in the developer community, and then hopefully people will come and you know work on apps for our devices. And that day I essentially became the head of developer relations for that company. I'm saying head, I was the one person.
Right.
So I was the head of myself. And I essentially threw myself into the developer advocacy world without knowing what I was doing or why. And one of the things I did, I convinced, I don't know, I don't remember how, but I must have been the best bullshitter in the world. I managed to convince the company to get a booth at a couple of DroidCons in 2013, because I know they existed, but I'd never been to one. And so my first DroidCon, I was a sponsor at. I had a booth, and I had a talk. So I was like, I got there and I realized I might have gotten slightly over my head with a bunch of things. I was like, yeah, I mean, I've seen people giving talks at like Google I/O, but that's all I know. And
I mean,
yet,
how hard can it be, right?
yeah,
Right.
exactly. How hard can it be? And I think this goes to prove that sometimes YOLOing is the best way to go. And I,
Yeah.
like you, Adam, I was hooked with the sense of community, with the feeling of being with hundreds of other people that have the same interests that I have. Well, maybe not that nerdy about pixels, but you know, with each with their own differences. And the just I started meeting people from the community, as you said, like people that I've looked up to a lot because they maybe wrote blog posts or did talks in previous conferences. And it was great to like it was a welcoming feeling that I got hooked to, and that even though I have not been doing Android as my main job for almost 6 years now, I'm still in the Android community. I still frequent it. I still show up to conferences and give talks with things that are generally relevant for the Android community, and I'm still interested in keeping up with what's going on in Android and in the Android community. So I know what you mean, and I don't know if people watching this have been to a conference, but I strongly recommend you attend conferences. Speaking of, Ivan, I just realized we have discount codes for Droidcon
Discount.
Berlin to give away.
Yes. We will find a way. So I mean, we have a
So prepared.
yeah, sure. So you know what? I'm gonna. So if you want to go to Droidcon Berlin and you don't have a ticket yet, just say it in the chat. We have like a handful of tickets. I have no
It's
problem.
25% off.
Yeah,
Ticket.
it's not like a pre-ticket, but it's still money that then you can spend in beer or currywurst or something. I don't know. I mean, doner.
Definitely.
I mean,
or taking out cash at a random ATM in Berlin because they don't take card anywhere.
Yeah, don't get me started. We were having this conversation before the stream with a couple of friends. I was like, but I thought Germany was very
that was
advanced.
yesterday even.
No. Again, today, believe me, it's haunting me. Everybody, because I never been in Berlin, but I thought they were like advanced in Germany. You know, I was like, yeah, everything but trains and money. I mean, so the rail system is ridiculous compared to Italy, and that's I mean, because the ATM and the card payment situation in Berlin is just nonsense. Anyway, cash heavy cities, so get ready if you go there. So
we were talking about conferences. I think even I don't like I kind of know better your story, but I don't think you've ever said specifically on a stream like how you ended up doing Android.
Yeah. So I ended up doing okay.
I know it's a long story. Do the short
No,
version.
it's not super long. So we were building robots with access gateways at the university. So I was very skilled on Linux in general. I started with Linux very early. And when we were at the university, we were messing around and hacking around with, DSL access gateways, because there was one from the Italian main internet service provider that it was pretty much hackable with a US robotic firmware. So I'm talking before Arduino, okay? And with a custom firmware, we basically were building robots, because that thing was you could export GPIO. It was cool. So a lot of Linux there, embedded Linux. So when Android came out, we jumped on the same thing, because now we had a Linux system that it had a display and a battery. So it was even cooler for building things, because it it was small. It was. I mean, my first smartphone was like 99 euros. It was like a Huawei something, Huawei Ideos, I remember. But for a long time I was very much on the lower level of the Android system. So we were building ROMs, we were hacking things around, super user stuff. And then when I started working after university, I started working as a Java developer, so Java Enterprise, like a lot of PTSD there. And and I was also renting for an apartment for the first time, and there was no money, pretty much no money. And building things that were embedded, at some point I realized because I was working on access gateways as well, and I realized I'm gonna be working for a long time on something that is gonna be probably in 1 million houses in Italy, and nobody's gonna know. Like, I was missing the fact that a bit of recognition, you can call it, or fame or whatever. And then I realized, okay, I don't have money to go out on a Saturday. I know Java. I have an Android phone. Let's build Cordoba apps, because that was the that was the reasonable thing to do, right? Because and so I started building Android apps. I'm kidding, but they were Cordova and Java stuff. But and I started building things out of, I have a Linux machine, I have an Android phone, and I don't have money to party. No, I'm serious, because because when people ask why did you pick Android instead of iOS, I mean, there's definitely more money on the iOS side of a app developer career, or at least at the time it was the delta from a salary point of view. It was pretty relevant, and I'm always being honest. I didn't have any money. I was using illegally the company laptop to build my stuff, because you are young, you don't really know about laws. I mean, whatever, right? But again, that was the reason. There was a mere there was no real interest on the Google Store versus the App Store kind of thing. I was like, okay, I know I have this thing. I want to code. I want to build things that people can use. And then, it grew on me, because I started working as an Android developer, like for real. And a lot of stuff that I was doing already came useful, the Git, that kind of stuff. So the whole career took momentum, gained momentum. And then the conferences, I didn't have any experience, and I never been anywhere. And at some point, one year, they didn't renew my contract, and I ended up like at the beginning of January. I was like unemployed. We can say, like, between contracts, I would say, to be a bit more fancy. And they reached out for the book, if I wanted to write a book about RX Java. And my wife actually pretty much pushed me and was like, okay, you don't have a contract right now, so you're free. You can write the book. You can write the actual technical book. You can write it. We are not starving, because I have a job, so we won't starve. If you don't do it right now, you will never do it, because I know you. And she was right. And so I wrote the book, and when the book came out, also DroidCon Berlin had the call for paper out. It was, late spring, and I was like, I can talk about the stuff in Berlin. And they accepted, because at the time RX Java was the rage, because it was very new. And I was very lucky, because I ended up on learning RX Java from a .NET developer. So, he knew RX.NET, and he built a homemade version of RxJava in the company. And so he trained me and Sasha on that library. So the fundamentals were the same. We didn't have filter. We had where. We didn't have, it was there was those slightly difference because he came from .NET, and so when the actual RxJava came out, I was an expert on a library that came out yesterday. So I had a lot of credibility because I was basically the wet dream of every recruiter. Like
Right.
we want somebody with 6 months of experience or something that they just released.
Yeah.
I was the guy.
It's generally
Yeah.
the author of the library.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it was just Carnock. It was Ben Christensen at the time. He was. I mean, they were like two people, right? And then I ended up speaking for the first time at Droidgon Berlin. They picked my talk as the last talk of the conference. So they gave me 2 days to build that anxiety because that's how you do it, right? And the closing talk basically was the only talk. So there were 2 tracks, but they funneled in my final talk. So I had never done public speaking, and I ended up on a stage, and I was like, okay, so imagine like full room, like like a warehouse.
Yep.
And at some point, for security fire reasons, they couldn't have people standing, so they started bringing more chairs. And I was like, okay, this is it. I'm gonna die. There is the video is still on YouTube. Probably you can actually feel I was like this close to passing out, and then I got and then there is like either you do it or you die. So this is it, right? The only way out is through. And so there was a bit of an intense first talk. So I don't I don't suggest anybody does that. I'm more like in a incremental, audience, incremental side. But again, that was the first DroidCon, and I was so happy because there was the first conference. I remember I still have like the gadgets that they gave there. It has like been like 10 years, and yeah, and
I found it.
first of all, like half the size. I mean, look at how fat I am, but the experience was great. And then after that, I was like, okay, I can do this, and I want to do this. And I had like a couple of years that we were going around like every day. I had my Danny Pressler moment, Ash Davis moment. I was like, they are always going somewhere, and it was great. And then eventually I started to reduce because you need to find when you're freelancing, you don't have a company that can sponsor you, so that's also starts to affect the budgeting situation.
Yeah.
So but again, I mean, we can't wait for DroidCon Italy this year. I can't, because it's like around the corner. So it's a less intense money effort. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, and it's also our local DroidCon, so
yeah, it's our local DroidCon, and it's a different emotional connection with the conference itself. But also local meetups are something that I really enjoyed in my life, and it's an interesting topic.
Maybe we can talk a bit about meetups, because I know, Adam, you have a slightly different experience over there than we have over here. So
yeah, so to fill everyone else in on that, so we were talking about how the meetup culture has kind of changed in recent years since the pandemic. So when I first moved to New York City, which was in 2018, there was it started before this, but there was basically a monthly Android meetup. We'd get probably 50 to 100 people once a month at some random company in the city, and we'd have like 2 tech talks, and there'd be pizza, beer, all this fun stuff. It was a great time, but then obviously in 2020, we couldn't safely do that, so that just stopped happening, and we have not had one since. Uh, and I don't think like some other U.S. cities that had them, like I don't think San Francisco has really done this either. And but I guess that's interesting. What's interesting is I've heard that's not really the same problem over in Europe. That places like London and Paris are having pretty large regular meetups, and so I spent a lot of time trying to understand what the difference is. You know, why they didn't come back. Something that I had thought in the beginning is an interesting community thought in general. Is like there's a to use an Android word here, but there's like a life cycle to a community, right? You have people who are the organizers. They are planning the meetups, scheduling the meetups, finding speakers. Closely, you've got the speakers, right? And then you've got like all of your attendees. And these people, typically people will cycle through those roles. You'll get new people who come to a meetup for the first time as an attendee. As they're going, they learn more. Some of them get motivated. Some of them want to take on that sort of leadership role within the community and start organizing meetups, finding speakers. And the people who have been doing this for a while eventually like kind of phase out of this, right? And I think a lot about how like in 2020 that cycle broke because the people who were organizing meetups in 2020, their lives were still moving forward. Maybe they got married, maybe they got kids, maybe they moved out of the city. They're no longer in a position to lead these local meetups. At the same time, nobody new is coming in to be shown the ropes on how to do this. So that was kind of my hypothesis. But then when I look at like, well, not everywhere had this problem, I started to rethink that. Like, I still think there's truth to that. And that may be why like it was slow for things to come back in certain cities. Maybe even why DroidCons took a while to pick back up. Yeah, I've been playing around with ideas, and I mentioned before I had an interesting take on this that I got from Kevin Galligan. So Kevin Galligan, he was one of the co-founders of TouchLab, a mobile consultancy that does a lot of KMP stuff, and he used to, well, still does take a decent role in organizing DroidCon New York, but he also used to be sort of the main organizer for the New York meetup. And I had met with him and asked him maybe his thoughts on why the New York City meetup hadn't picked back up. Because like, not to call him out personally, but I'm like, I know like your life has continued. So I kind of asked him like, why do you think no one else has stepped up to do this? And he flipped the whole question on his head and was like, there's a culture shift now where what he said is like, before 2020, remote work wasn't as common, so a lot of us were commuting into the city for work, right? And if there is a meetup in the city after work, it's like, well, I'll stop by on my way home. I can have dinner there. I can see people, you know, I'm already out. That was like a big part of it. He said now with so many people working remotely and working from home, people have to go out specifically for the meetup. And this sounds bad, I don't know the word for it, but like that's not always worth it. Like it kind of depends like on the topics, who's going to be there, how far away is it, what company is it at, all these things that,
How
you know, if you were
tired you are.
already, yeah, exactly. Like if you were already out, if you were already like had commuted into the city and you had to go back home, it's a different mentality. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And like I think that's valid. That could very well be sort of what we've seen in New York. And so something I had thought about is, you know, how do we take that information and what can we change about our meetup culture to work with that? Like, because if that's true, then maybe we need to rethink like, oh, monthly meetups aren't worth it, but would everyone come in once a quarter? You know, I've also talked to
Or
some other
something a
people.
bit
It's like,
bigger, maybe, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, or
Like
less,
a
just by being
midway,
less frequent.
a midway
Yeah,
between a meetup and a conference, sort of.
yeah, yeah. I just think by being less frequent, like it's not like, oh, I have to do it every month, but like it maybe every 3 months. Or the other thing that I found interesting, so I just had this conversation last week at DroidCon San Francisco, is when the meetups were happening regularly, you know, like I knew people that I only met at the meetup. But like because it was a habit, like we always knew they would be there. And now, because it's infrequent, like you don't always know who's going to be there. And again, it sounds bad, but humans can be selfish. And so like if I am not sure if these certain people I want to see are there, then I might not be inclined to go. And then the other people I'm talking about are having the same problem. So there's also that. It's like, can we try to maybe foster more communication around a meetup? Because like if you know who's going to be there, then like that can also build anticipation. So those are just some thoughts I've thrown around. But I'd be curious, like, because I correct me if I'm wrong, but like remote work seems pretty common over in Europe as well. That doesn't seem to have hindered the
So
meetups there. Or so do you feel like it's a similar thing, or
I think
like why
yes
do you
and
think they're
no.
flourishing there?
So
Yeah.
there's definitely an amount of people that are working remote, that are, you know, outside of, they moved out
Mhm.
of, like myself, outside of a big
Mhm.
city, and now I've moved back to Italy in late 2019. So I kind of knew when I moved back to Italy, and especially outside of, you know, the big uh, Milan
Mhm.
opportunity where you might have more frequent things. I don't think they do, but it's better than my town. It's a town. There's probably like 20 developers. I don't know.
Right.
uh, and the so I kind of knew on one hand that moving back to my hometown, I wouldn't be attending meetups anymore, which was something that I really enjoyed doing when I was living in London. If anything, because the events there were always great. Always, even if I didn't care about the talks, I was gonna go there for the people,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
to see that conference friends and meetup friends, as you were saying.
Yeah.
Shout out to the London Droid people and and Novoda, the event
Yeah.
organizing company.
So I think that's actually an interesting case, because when COVID hit, obviously people in London and Novoda were also impacted by the changes and the lockdowns and whatnot. The interesting thing is that I think they only started again less than a year ago. So it took time
Yeah.
to restart things. In part, it might have been because, you know, Nevada is a company, and COVID times were weird times where there was a hyper growth of some companies. Other companies were struggling. Other companies will were stable but very busy dealing with the changes, you know, where suddenly everyone is working from home, and then your clients that you maybe used to visit in person every week, you cannot do that anymore. Some I know, for example, Novoda has closed some of their offices. I think they eventually transitioned to a fully remote company where, like, all those things take up a lot of mental space for the people that are running the company and running the meetups. So I think that it's partly that.
Mhm.
Also, the person that was organizing the meetups in practice uh, had a kid, so that, you know, also
Yeah.
that played
No, that
into it.
happens.
But that's
Yeah.
something that Adam, mentioned. That
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
grow up, you grow
Yeah.
out your position because life happens,
yeah,
Yep.
and then you have I like the idea of a life cycle of a
Yeah.
meetup, because
Yeah.
I feel now that when you said it, I was like, I remember when I launched the Google Developer Group in Geneva.
Mhm.
Okay, I was living in France, like across the border, because Switzerland. So I couldn't be in Switzerland, but I wanted to create the Google Developer Group there, and and we did. It was me and another person. We tried for a few months. We had a few events in a co-working space, but then I ended up being the only one always doing the talk, the single talk of the
Yeah.
event, because I had a couple of prepared talk in the pipeline, as usually happened at that time. And then I moved to Berlin. So the GDG in Geneva died because also the time was there was no mobile development in Geneva at the time. There was something in Lausanne, but as you say, people were passing by Geneva. You work in Lausanne, you get on a train, you go home.
Yep.
So now, if you want to do the event, you have people working in Lausanne. They have to actually step out of the train, join your meetup, and then now it's like 2 hours later, and they have to catch another train to actually go to France, for instance.
And that was Switzerland, and everything is closed, and you cannot eat anything anywhere.
This is a grumpy old man yelling
it's true.
And flags.
It's 6 p.m. It's time to eat.
I mean, anyway. But then when I moved to Berlin, I was happy because I didn't need to be the one organizing everything, because I did the same thing when back at university. We had a Linux user group. It was always me like, yo, let's try to do things. And then when I moved to Berlin, I think it was up and running. Mario, Katie, Hassan, they were like nailing it. I mean, the whole thing was just going like sailing through every month. And after a couple of years, the person that was working with me in Geneva on the meetup, they came back to me. I was like, Ivan, can you give me the keys for the Twitter account and the Slack account, because we are rebooting the meetup? And the Google developer group. I was like, it changed. Time changed. So something happened. Something changed there, because it actually started again. And so I really, it resonated a lot, the idea of a life cycle, right? So it doesn't need to be you today. It can be just a seed, and then something else is going to happen.
Yes. So that is something I've thought about. I didn't say is, I'm pretty sure this is also in my conversation with Kevin, is I pitched him my hypothesis that like there was no one to be like, when leadership moves on, there's no one to teach the new people how to get it started. And he said, well, how did it start in the beginning? Like, someone had to just take the risk and create a meetup culture. And so I started thinking about that. Like, I guess it can just happen organically. Sometimes if you just wait, you'll find a person who is willing to step up into that role. Because that's how it started the first time, right? Yeah.
Maybe it's different times from, when it first started 10 years ago or whatever. Because when the Android meetup in London started, which I think was probably the first in the world, because they have meetup.com/Android. So I will take by that they're probably the first ones anywhere. It was, mobile was a new thing. Mm-hmm. It was also a time where a lot of us saw the future in being mobile. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of interest, there was a lot of buzz, there was a lot of opportunity as well. And I mean, some of the meetups have been started not just because of the community sense, but also because companies wanted to hire people. They wanted to sponsor these events because they were a way to get to know people or to show off their technical chops and get people to apply. And these days, that's not really the case anymore. Like, the market is kind of fucked right now. The job market.
Come on.
I mean, it's much more difficult than it was 2 years ago. Or
the amount of talks at Droidgone Berlin that handed like, thank you for coming, we are hiring if you want to reach me. That was the standard, right? Or maybe, every now and then you do the event at, it was like Groupon. Or it was always like, a few companies that were trying to bring people in.
Yeah. Well, I think the first one is like sampling bias, like because it's DroidCon. So of course they're the ones who are hiring are going to be there. But I think that was true in New York too, is like what they would typically do is they'd find like various companies to host, and it would usually be companies who were hiring. They'd be like, "Oh, come to the actual meetup office, and before the tech talks, there's a meetup recruiter or a meetup CTO who wants to introduce the thing," or you'd have it at the Facebook office, and then because that would be the trade-off. Because usually the hosted company has to, well, they have to run the space, so they might need security to stay late. They need to bring food, but that was fine when it was a marketing budget. But
Yeah.
now, if it's not a recruiting budget, who's going to spend money to feed 100 people for no reason? It's going to be very hard to find a company willing to do that. And I think that's another problem people might have in bringing it back. Is where do you host this?
The venue, let's call it the venue situation is something that is a bit disturbing here as well for me, because I found out, thanks Daniele, that he's running the GDG in Milan. I found out that even in my tiny town, or kind of half an hour away, I'm in the countryside, so everything is half an hour away. I feel very US sometimes, but
You have to drive everywhere.
Yeah, pretty much. But I have a nice car, so everything's fine. So there is also a Google developer group here, and a couple of months ago, I went to the first event, and it was on a Saturday morning at 10 in the morning, right? So I was like, weekends are for family, but even be a community person. I went there, we had fun. I gave away a bunch of stickers from Code with Italians, and there was some guy talking about Flutter. There was another person pitching some AI stuff. It was cool, but then I realized that wouldn't ever, and because the venue was some, communal space, like the town gives you like a room in a convention center or whatever. So if you are like a onlus or non-profit, I would say, you get a room every now and then. But that won't work for this kind of event. I was already over it after the first time, because I had been so much primed from Berlin that I know what can work. I mean, if you Berlin Droid, and when they always do it it's a club, it's a pub, kinda, right? It's a very cool place to go. It's very peculiar in the Seabase is very peculiar in the Berlin nerd sphere, let's say, and there's no catering or nothing, right? You just go there. If you're the speaker, they pay you for they give you a beer for free, and everybody else is just paying for their drinks and whatever, right? That's it. It's a pub. It's a club. I don't know if it's a pub, but you get the point, right? So you have a bunch of adults that they are already there because they want to get drinks, and now you have also nerds on the other side, and there is somebody talking about Android stuff on a stage, right? So it's very organically integrated in something that it's already there, and it will be there even without the Android meetup.
Yeah,
and it gave me a lot of thoughts about the environment, the timing, the effort to be there, as you mentioned. The idea is that I'm already out for drinks,
right?
And now there is also some Android nerds, right? That works. It's a win-win situation. And that's why, with Roberto, we are trying to persuade the organizers to, mix it up a bit, because they also struggle to get people at events, right? So, but again, it's Saturday morning, right? It's a hard sell, my friend.
Yeah.
So you need
especially something that is work adjacent. Like, I just worked for 5 days. Saturday is my day off. Like, there's a handful of us who do live and breathe Android 7 days a week, but I can't expect the average person who would attend this. It's probably easy to find a speaker willing to speak on a Saturday, but much harder to find an attendee. Like, I just worked for 5 days. Why would I? It's kind of the same thing as the other stuff. Like, You have to be in the mood to attend these things. I think that's true for us as well. I just think some of us have a higher tolerance for that.
Yeah, it also depends, like if you have kids, if you have
Yeah, exactly.
like family needs of any kind,
Yeah,
if you live in the city or you live near the city, all those things add to each other and
yeah,
result in everyone has their own considerations, but I think the more you move to, like, the further away you move a work adjacent thing from work,
yes,
the harder it
yes,
is to sell it to people, both to
yeah,
speak and to attend.
yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I mean, now I was thinking that DroidCon Milan is on Friday and Saturday. I'm slightly annoyed at the Saturday part of it.
Wait, what?
Yes. I know, I know, I know.
I mean, it's good for me,
It's
but
good for
also
you.
it's good for me because I invoice, so I just need to I just lose one day, but
Yeah,
that's
but
the week. Is it?
oh,
Okay.
yeah,
Are
yeah,
you
yeah.
sure?
I'm 99% sure it's Friday and Saturday.
You know, there was something that was happening in Switzerland with the Voxet people. You know,
Hmm.
the Java-ish company, the Java-ish conference. They were doing it over the weekend because people couldn't actually enjoy 3 days at work. You know, it was a hard sell for for the employee to sell.
Mhm,
Like, can I go to a conference on a Thursday? And
mhm.
and that's why they started doing it over the weekend to start building momentum for the community. And then they moved to, and when they gained credibility, they moved it to the week. I mean, we're talking. I mean, they now have it's incredible. I mean, I love them, Ciao Federico and and Celestino, because they do a great job. And I was the last one that I went. It was at when I was living in France. They did it at CERN, the physics research center, European thingy, and it was incredible. You know that the venue was impossible to replicate. Jesus. And everybody was there. You know, was Venkat was there. You know, and it's not a now it's like a incredible company. And but when I think about, and I always enjoyed Devox and Voxer days, even though they were not Android conferences, because the vibe was cool. You know, you are when you go there, you are kind of the mobile slash Kotlin person. So and the vibe is different. You know, because
Yeah,
you know that you will end up talking to somebody that maybe has no clue or what's a coroutine, or
yeah,
and then I'm like, oh yeah, Java, and then you learn things that are different, and you expand also what you could like.
mhm.
So that over the time it became something that I really appreciate. And that's, DroidCon is like my kind of safe space. I know everybody, especially
Yeah,
if we go in Milan or in London, because we have friends there, and especially the Italian one is pretty much like it's like a reunion. I mean,
yeah,
because we plan ahead of time to actually
yeah,
go there, so it's very intimate. But a lot of time you go there for the people,
yes,
like, and it got to a point where
yes,
I kind of don't go to talks anymore, because this thing is going to end up on YouTube in three
yeah,
weeks. The
yeah,
people won't, right?
right.
And that's why you see me going around, and my
Yep.
Fitbit just goes ballistic at the end of the day, because, oh, even you ran half a marathon. I was like, no, I just gave away stickers,
Yeah.
yeah, for like 6 hours. And
Yeah.
again, if you are very specialized as a meetup, you also risk that kind of, this thing is so much of a niche.
Mm.
Niche? Niche? How is
Niche.
it? Niche? Niche? Sorry, I can't English at this time. That then you also lose the opportunity. Okay, but what if I can bring an attendee or a speaker that is not an Android person? Would it be valuable for the people, right? It's that kind of thoughts say, okay, this thing is not taking momentum, getting momentum. What if we open it up a bit?
Yeah, that's something that I think I've come to really love about the Android community that we haven't talked about yet, is like I have met some of my best friends through the Android community. Like people that started work adjacent, but now they are just part of my life. Like one of the groomsmen who stood up at my wedding is Matt McKenna. He's also an Android GDE. We met on Twitter over Kotlin, but started playing video games, and now we are best friends. And we rant about home ownership, and we have traveled together to unrelated things, and so many other people that are just like part of my life, but I met them through DroidCon or through a meetup and stuff like that. And I think that's really cool. That's what makes what I think makes our community special, is because like the focus is on Android, but it can lead to so much more than that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like to the point where people are like, oh yeah, I'm also going to be in London, but let's both show up a day early and go explore London or go to this restaurant. Like that's really cool that it's extended beyond just the events, so to speak.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Yeah.
I agree. It's one of the things that even if I stopped doing programming completely from one day to the next, I would still bring with me are the people that I met. That might be more complicated to meet because they tend to be from around the world.
Yes.
And I'm kind of mourning the what used to be Google I/O, because it was a great moment to meet a lot of those people, because we all gathered together in a for many people inconveniently located event. But this year it was the first Google I/O, like real Google I/O, with like a proper conference side to it and talks and attendees, and since COVID, and it was good. It was great. It was some of what it used to be, but I felt like, because of the fact that I/O this year is regional, there were a lot of people that I used to see at I/O that I didn't get to see. It was great because I still managed to see some friends from the US that I hadn't seen in a long time. But it was weird not seeing my European friends at I/O.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's now it gets a commitment at some point, right? Because 10 years ago it was easier. 10 years ago when I started going around, it was just me, my wife, not even my wife, my fiance at the time. So it's supposed to like, yeah, let's go around. So let's, just go 1 week there. Let's have a long weekend.
Yeah.
And now I have a dog, a toddler. So every time I move, it's like it's a bit more intense because
don't forget the garden.
There is a garden, I planted zucchini and that kind of stuff. I need to attend. But again, there is always that, thought like, okay, I'm going there and this is cool. I'm meeting people, but I'm also taking time away from my family. So now you have also that thing to reason about. It feels very dramatic, but then, it adds up because you have other things, and now you have to juggle more stuff. And you can definitely plan for it, as I'm doing for November, even if I didn't even know that was on a Saturday. So, but I mean,
you're planning.
Yeah,
the way we plan the streams.
The way we
I'm gonna
plan
show
everything.
up on the day, be like, "Hello."
Look, this kind of stuff is gonna. It gives me anxiety. So I usually delegate this stuff to my wife. She has been doing that.
She's an excellent organizer.
Yeah, she has been doing it for a living forever. So she enjoys booking flights and trains and stuff. And that works for me. So but again, it's definitely fewer events, but with a different focus. Right, you go there for the people. And with meetups, I think it's the same thing. And you were saying something before, like, what if it's not worth it, right? I go there,
Yeah.
it's not. I mean, it sounds harsh,
But it's true.
but again,
And we have to say
that's
it.
the reality, right? So you need to. You are an adult. You need to take decisions, and
Yeah. And when I think about it, I want to be clear, like, I don't say that as a, like, pessimist that, like, it's not worth it to have meetups, but more so it's like, it's a challenge to the people thinking about organizing them. It's like, there's now almost a sort of, and maybe it was always been there, but it was just easier to your point, but like, there's a marketing aspect to it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to, I guess, I don't know how to say it, but like, you have to make it worth it. And I think that is a solvable problem. I think that is something we could do. But like, we have to think about that angle, because it's not as easy as having the event and people showing up anymore. At least I don't think it's that simple. So as an organizer, you have to think about that. And there's so many different avenues I've learned from different people. It's how often do you meet up? What kind of speakers or topics do you have? Where is it? Like, there's, you know, where, what day and time, to Ivan's point earlier, like, there's so many things to explore. And I don't mean that to say that we can't do it, but like, that is the challenge. We have to find out, how do we get people there again?
but
Because,
you have to.
yeah.
Sorry, please.
Well, just that those of us here, like, we do know the benefit of going to these things. But there's probably a whole bunch of new people in the Android community who also don't know that. So there's also, it's almost like two different problems. Like, you have to try to figure out how to get some of these veterans back, and again, this is sort of a post-COVID problem, right? You have to figure out, how do you get some of these veterans to come back into that, but also how do you cater to these new folks who have learned Android in the last few years? And I think that the answer to those people might also be different. So it's a hard problem for sure. I'm not going to pretend to have the answers, or I would have started a New York meetup again if I had them. So I understand I might sound like a hypocrite by calling out all these problems, but I don't have the solutions to them. But maybe someone watching or listening will, and
yeah,
that's the point.
Nobody's expecting that you have the solution, because that's a very, I think it's a human problem more than a tech problem. Yes. And the marketing side, as you mentioned, that's the same thing that happens to projects at some point, right? So you are a nerd, you build something, and you are happy, right? Yeah. But now nobody is fucking using it because nobody knows, right? Nobody knows about it. So at some point you're like, okay, now apparently I'm also 50% a salesperson.
Yeah.
But it feels like a joke, but that's a hard thing to swallow, because now for the greater good, you can't actually do what you want all the time.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, right? So you start a meetup and it's like, yeah, let's meet nerds, and then you realize, okay, but now I need to do social media manager. I need to be like an event organizer. You talk to the venue, you talk to the speaker. Is it they are gonna actually come? So basically now you are an event manager.
Yep.
And that was do you remember Carl at the DroidCon London last year? For how long people thought that Novoda was an event company? And they were like, no, we do software. But they went so hard on the let's organize, DroidCon and meetups and things, that at some point, and they were always there, right? Novoda. And I was like, they can't actually be doing anything else, but they were.
Yeah.
That's something that you need to realize. You need to understand. At some point, you're like, okay, now I'm a social media manager. Well, it turns out for the stream, it's actually the same.
Yeah.
Because now, Sebastiano trolls me, and he also gave me a nice T-shirt with ChatGPT that builds the titles and the tweets. Uh-huh. But that's the thing. That's a signal of how much effort goes into. Oh, let's just rant for 2 hours on Twitch every week. Kinda. He's managing all the technical stuff, bringing people in, making sure that the guest is comfortable and organized, and he built the whole to-do list to checklist. And I do the social part, with GPT and things. But then, goes the tooling and the stuff and the scheduling. Again, you need to pick every time we do this, we don't code or we don't spend time with the family. So that's the thing.
Or we don't play video games.
We started playing Dungeons and Dragons again a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, man, and I was like,
you had too much spare time.
No, I'm paying tons of money because now the nanny does extra hours. So this is the most expensive Dungeons and Dragons campaign ever, because every week. But jokes aside, that's a decision that you need to take.
Yeah. Yep.
So do you want to be a social media manager, Adam?
Does it pay?
That's the thing. So
doesn't really.
But also, it's the friends that how you make her on
that
the
you tweeted
on
to along the way.
But I will say, I think I said this in the beginning when I talked about what inspired me about my first DroidCon is when you reflect on all of that, you start to realize, you look back at how much has gone into all the events that I've ever been to. Like the first DroidCon I went to, I was just taking it all in, and I thought it was so cool. And then I look back at like how much money went into that, all of the hard work, dozens of speakers put into this, all the work finding a venue. And it's like, to that point, like, this is a pretty thankless job that doesn't really make people money. Like, yes, some DroidCons will turn a profit, but that profit just goes into the next year, right? It's not like a personal financial goal. And like, I don't know how to say it, like, that to me is just like really humbling, that like our community is built around people who want to see the community succeed no matter what, even at their own personal like mental health and or financial expense. That's really cool. Like the whole Android community is kind of built on that, everything from conferences to open source software. But I love it. Like I wanted to call that out because I never want people to like lose sight of that, that our community is very much like by the community, for the community, and everything that it does.
Yeah, I mean, even if you think about it, like DroidCon is a for-profit. Well, it started as a community thing, but then over time it became a for-profit organization. And yet, if you talk to the people that work at DroidCon, you talk to Greg, you talk to anyone else on the team, they care. They're not there purely to make money. They're not there to extract value. They're there to build a community because they believe that in the long run is better for everyone. If there is that. And believe me, I've worked 1 year very closely in the organization of the entirety of DroidCon London. It's an insane amount of money that you have to put down in advance. And it's an insane amount of effort to organize a conference. As an attendee, you do not realize 10% of what the amount of work that goes into a conference. It's insane. And even like I'm still on the DroidCon London Call for Papers committee, so the technical talk selection. And even that is, if you do it right, like if you do it, give it 100%, which you should, because like you do it not because it pays, you do it because you believe in it, then it's dozens of hours of work. Because like last year, DroidCon London, we had 430 submissions, something like that. And you have to read through all of them. And some of them are books. The abstracts are this long. They're clearly written with ChatGPT. Don't do that. It's a terrible idea. People will not get you talking. It takes a lot of time to read every single abstract. And then you have to like rank them by yourself. And then you have to have at least one session with everyone else on a video call with the rest of the committee discussing why we should pick this talk instead of that talk, because at the
Mhm.
end, even if talks are ranked by the amount of votes that they get from every juror, at the end there's other choices that you have to make, because there might be two
Right.
talks that have the same topic, or maybe this speaker is known to be good at this stuff but maybe not that much on that other thing. So do we want to take a gamble or not? All those things take a long time. Last year, the first call we had was like, I think, 3+ hours
Wow.
non-stop, and then we had another one with less people to finalize things, and to, because you send out, oh yeah, you've been accepted, and then someone is like, oh, I forgot I applied to Dorcon London, I actually cannot make it.
Yeah.
That always happens. So you have to scramble and go back and figure out if you can fill the gap some other way.
Yep.
So it's like, it's probably been like 30 to 50 hours
Yeah.
of time just for the call for papers. It's
And then
just,
you have to schedule them and
yeah,
try not
yeah,
to have like two rock star speakers in the same slot if you can help it. And I'm sure that's probably one of the
yeah.
hardest
That the
parts.
part of the 50 hours was also that.
Yeah.
It's 30 if you don't count that.
Yeah.
It's more if you also include the scheduling of all the people and
Yeah.
all the talks, and trying to have blocks of similar topics in the same room, so you don't have people at every break running
Yeah.
from one side to the other of the conference center.
So yeah, at DroidCon San Francisco, they did something similar. They partnered with the Gradle folks, and they had this sort of like a DPE, Developer Productivity and Experience track. So any talk related to build time improvements, to developer experience tooling, to anything like that, they were all in the same room. So for that same reason, like if that's what your focus was, you could just kind of hang on that one room all day, uh, which is pretty cool. I'd like to see that idea carried over a little more. You could have like your composed talks in one area, and it's just easier for the attendees
Yeah,
because then everyone's not scrambling in between each talk. And
yeah. It gets very complicated. It's almost multidimensional chess when you
yeah,
because at the end of the day, there's always a bunch of submissions that are the topics of the year that are
mhm,
trendy. So last year it
mhm,
was a uh, random talks about, oh, I put AI, or you can put AI in X, and it was like,
yep,
okay, sure, fine. The year before maybe was, oh, you can do compose. The
yeah,
year before was, oh, you can do coroutines. There's always a lot
yeah,
of overlap in those big topics. It's really
yeah,
hard to pick speakers, and then you can also work with speakers to tell them, hey, there's this other person that is also doing a talk about a similar thing. I see some overlap but not entirely. Do you want to work on this together with them to tweak the contents of your talk and their talk so that they don't overlap but they complement each other? So it's a lot of coordination that goes on.
yeah,
I don't know, it's also, I feel like this year, it's, with all the layoffs and all the just generally stinginess from all the companies, some more justifiable than others. It's also more difficult to justify what we were saying earlier, like marketing the idea of going to a conference to your
yeah,
employer. It gets more and more difficult, and it gets more difficult to say, I'm gonna go, for you, Adam, I'm gonna go to Europe to speak, because it's obviously
yeah,
a different cost for the company in terms
yeah,
of time, in terms of travel.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I'm a bit worried about is that this is gonna create more isolated bubbles, and as opposed to the more, I don't want to call it jet setting, but a more global, at least in Western countries, community, where there was a lot of back and forth between North America and Europe. And I feel like it's going to be less and less as time goes on if things don't change. And I don't know how
yeah.
to fix that. I don't even know if it's
Right.
something we want to fix, because there's been always people say, "Oh, you shouldn't take, planes and stuff," and I'm like, oh, well,
Yeah.
planes will fly anyway. But
Yeah.
it's on one hand, we got to taste what remote conferences feel like, and personally, I don't like that.
Yeah. I think that's a common theme.
I don't know many people that enjoyed giving talks to their computers.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to get a feel for the audience, which is something you can only do when you're, in person.
Yeah. And I think a big
So
thing of conferences is networking.
yeah,
And it's hard to foster networking in a purely digital environment. It's also a lot to ask of people to sit in front of a screen and watch videos for 8 hours. Like, even when I go to DroidCon, I'm not sitting and watching talks for 8 hours. I'm taking a break, going to have lunch, whatever. And I guess I can do that for a virtual conference too. But like I said, if I take a break at DroidCon, chances are I'm meeting a random person in the hallway and making some crazy industry connection that
yeah.
I never would have made otherwise. I've met some of the best people at DroidCon by just hanging out in the hallway.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, but
never
that's
know who you're going to meet. It's
that's-
crazy.
That's the thing. It's not the. It's basically the excuse. It's almost, for me, it became the excuse to actually unplug for like a couple of days, go somewhere and
Yeah.
meet people that you know or you don't know.
Yeah.
Because there are always the speakers dinner, or is just having
Yep.
lunch in the same place with 1,000 people. I mean, when we were, I relocated in the countryside, and we were at DroidCon London last year, Sebastiano. Yeah, it was last year, right?
Yes.
So there were more people at DroidCon London than people in my town. Okay, so
Wow.
that's the thing. So you and I went from Berlin as like 3 million people to something like this. At some point, you're like, okay, I kind of crave the networking aspect of going to a conference. It's gonna be maybe a couple of conferences top for this year, because reasons. And when you move, it's like a caravan. It's not just you that jump on a plane, and now it's like a circus. And where do we put the dog? Do we bring the dog? Do we kill the dog? I mean, there's a lot of decisions to make. There are a lot of decisions to make, right? I do really want to go, but jokes aside, it gets a bit harder as you go. Yeah. So you have to pick, and then you have to decide. Okay, a bit. We need, for us, it's just okay. So we need to go to DroidCon Italy. There is no way around that. So that's it. That slot is taken.
Yep.
And then you have probably another shot to something, right? For instance, I missed DroidCon Berlin, right? I won't go. We won't go. And I was like, that's because I lived there for like 5 years, so it's cool. You have people there, friends, and so but you have a decision like, okay, maybe we can go. How is like DroidCon Portugal in September, and then you can make like a holiday out of it, right? So let's go 1 week in Portugal, and I'm gonna to a conference, right? So that kind of, let's go to the conference for again, and then you start questioning, okay, is it gonna can be different, but also involve the whole family? Can I transform my 2 days in something that I can bring also my kids with me, and and that's this is daddy friends or whatever, that's Uncle Seb, and he actually asked where is Uncle Seb the other day. I was like, he went home. But he okay.
I only take 2 days.
and he went back to his Legos. I mean, that's how it is, right? Like kids. But again, it becomes way less technical than before, because I mean, 20 years ago, you went to a conference because there was no fucking else, right?
Yeah.
That's it. You go there. Oh my God, IBM is showing stuff. Boom, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, look at
Now
this.
we're
thing.
old and cynical. Oh my God, IBM is showing stuff.
Oh, so give me a break. But that's the thing, right? So, I mean, you don't go to the Geneva car, show Jeff for the cars. It's just because you want to enjoy everything, and then you see the whole idea. It
I
made
would go
sense.
for the cars. Not all
Sure.
of them, but
No, but again, it made sense maybe in the past also for the knowledge. You go there, you learn stuff.
Right.
But then, now you have the internet, right?
Right.
As we say. Again, this thing is gonna be there. So if it's not a new talk, it's gonna be
Yeah.
on YouTube in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And chances are that they already did the same talk at DroidCon earlier this year. Put any random city earlier this year. That is good, right? Because you can't actually just throw out.
Yeah.
But then
people always say that, but I feel like there's only certain people who will go back and watch the videos. Like I always say it, and it's rare that I will go sit and watch the video. So I know like I should go when I'm there. Like there are certain talks I'm like I have to go in person because I want to learn this thing and I won't otherwise. That's not every single time slot, of course. Yeah.
Counterpoint. If I cannot be bothered watching it on my sofa, I cannot be bothered watching it on an uncomfortable chair in a conference center with 100 people around me.
That is fair. Yeah. I guess like it's more, well, I'm already here, so this is one that I may as well get my money's worth and see.
It's the friction.
Yeah.
It's the friction.
But I feel like it's when I reflect on like my history with the community, I realize like how much that's kind of changed. Is like the first time I went to one, it was all topic based, and now maybe especially as a speaker, I'd be like, oh, like Seb's talking, I'm gonna go sit in Seb's talk, even if I've already looked at material 3. I want to just go support my friend. So like, I'll have half my talks are like things I want to learn, and the other half are like I want to go support this person. It's just like a different
always
perspective
say the
that
same
way too.
thing, and then I end up talking to people, and they're like, "Ah, fuck, I'm 10 minutes late. Oh well."
Yeah.
So I end up like when I'm at a conference, there is this list of talks I want to go to. Some of them I care about because of the topic. Some of them I care about because of the topic and the speaker. Some of them I care about because of the speaker. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go. Oh hey, I haven't seen you in a year. How are you doing? And tell me about the crazy stuff you told me last time. As that project worked out, and so on and so forth. Like, I find it extremely difficult to actually attend talks at conferences at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Too many stickers to go away, too many speakers to invite.
Too many people to talk to. It's again the hallway track is my favorite track.
Exactly. Yeah, because that's not something you can get anywhere else. And like I said, I've met some incredible people just hanging out in the hallway or after parties. Like one of my favorite stories. This is actually my very first DroidCon. Is I was sitting at the after party and didn't really know anyone at the table because the person I went to the conference with was like off getting the drink or whatever. And I hear the people next to me talking about Nova Launcher. If you guys remember, this was like a custom launcher app that was super popular for a while. I think it still is, but the Pixel launcher has certainly improved. But anyways, I remember hearing about this, and I'm like, oh, this is my jump into the conversation. So I was like, oh, Nova Launcher is great. I've been using it for years. And the guy says, oh, thank you. It was the guy who develops Nova Launcher was sitting right next to me at the table. He was at the conference because he gave a talk on building custom launchers, and I had no idea who he was. And I start fangirling for a second, but I'm like, this is such a cool story. This is such a unique DroidCon experience where some random person who's never been to a conference and someone who is built an industry changing custom launcher can have a beer together, and it's just a totally normal thing. It's great.
Yeah, I agree. It's the best part of it, and it's It just happened in the chat, pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
The random encounters are the best part, obviously, of any conference.
Yeah. And that was kind of, I've realized this more as I got into speaking, but I know when I started, I was like a lot of other people where like you like look up to certain speakers as role models, you know, and you're like, oh, I'll never be like them stuff. But then like you realize like the speakers are just, they're the same. They're other people who also fight Android Studio and all of its issues and stuff. And honestly, like kind of realizing that made me so less nervous when I went to these things. Like I'm not afraid to just go up to anybody and talk to them, and I don't have to feel like intimidated that I'm gonna be judged or something.
I was talking with my wife about work the other day, and I was like, no, because I met Mark Ellison for the first time at a conference in 2016, something like that. I can't remember. We were in Poland and we were running the speaker bus, going back to the hotel, and she asked me the other day. I was like, yeah, but you never told me. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, did you talk? I was like, kinda. I was polite, hi, and just minding my business. And I was like, and she was like, but why? I mean, you work with Mark. I mean, I'm like, I work with Mark today. Back when we met, I didn't work with Mark. He was fucking Mark Ellison. That was it. He was Mark fucking. So there was no, oh yeah, hi Mark, how you doing? No, he was like, hi sir, yeah, very much. Thank you for the content. That's it, right? Yeah. It's that happens. That happens. Yeah. And then you end up working together. We're like, okay, and this is normal. Yeah, sure, normal. And then it's one of those things that you only experience going around, and the other one is like, I thought you were taller. That's the. I mean, how many people? I mean, I met somebody from the Italian community in London last year. I was like, hi, I'm Mark. I was like, shit. I mean, the guy was like way shorter than I expected, because we only met on Slack. I mean, my brain is just, brain farting. Why did you expect that he's taller? I don't know. But I was like, I expected you to be taller. Based on what? And then when I met Joseph, this is like 15 centimeters taller than me. I was like, shit. I mean, hi. It was like, I didn't expect that. It's like 2 meters. And again, it's that only happens in real life. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry for the remote conferences, whatever. You can't actually sell that experience. Like, yes. Again, it's like with chat. With chat is the same, right? Now it's like basically we're family. Every week is here. I can't actually so we can find a way to actually keep him away from the stream. He finds his way in.
He doesn't hate us yet, even.
Let's talk about career. And then 1 week later, I joined. I wrote something in a magazine together. I was like, yeah, whatever, come again. And but when I met it for the first time, I mean that's the thing. I mean, the guy speaks at Google I/O, right? I mean, the guy is on YouTube running the DroidGo Android, whatever. And I was like, you're like this, like, hi, can I have a selfie? The first time that I met Jake, it was hilarious. He was in Italy. Hi, Mr. Can I have a selfie? Mr. Wharton, I will never forget. Mr. Wharton, can I have a selfie? What the fuck are you talking about? And I have a selfie with Jack Wharton. Now it's like he's coming over. But that's the thing, right? That happens, right? They go from, oh my God, to, oh yeah, let's hang together. And I think that we were discussing this for probably with chat about the iOS community. You kind of don't see that, right? I mean, there is no Apple people that you can hang with.
Right.
That hang out with.
Yeah. Right. That's really special. That like the Googlers are part of our community. Like we have one here.
Not sure what you're talking about.
But like I remember like at DroidCon San Francisco, they had like an office hour set up where you could book time to talk with Google about your app, and I'm just like, I guess Apple does something similar at WWDC, but just in general, like, or I streamed about some stuff recently, and one of the developer advocates at Google sent me a private message and was like, hey, thanks for doing this stream. I looked at some of the things you struggled with, and I updated the documentation based on that. And I'm just like, that was so cool to me, like, because I mean, it was cool that I hadn't even asked for it, but again, it shows like in our community, you can also like really change things, like especially when it comes to Google and Android. Like your opinion on this stuff matters. Google is part of the community, and they're listening to that feedback. You know, they're
the amount of bug that Sebastiano
opened. Just clear, like it's not everything, but like, you know, whether or not they're always changing it, but I feel like there's a decent amount of listening at least.
But there is the chance, right? I mean, we found bugs over the stream, and for the first time, I have a repository that can reproduce the issue. I have a recording on YouTube, for fuck's sake. It's like, the thing is happening, and this is the code, and this is the minute. Just go here. You see, we are cursing everything. That's because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, and possibly the right person to send that bug to was also in the stream.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But I've also realized there's kind of like a responsibility, I guess, as like a speaker, to like when we talk about that like role model thing, to try and like pay that forward, I guess. So an example for this that always stuck with me. So Mark is talking about the time that a bunch of superstars got stuck in an elevator and we almost set Android back 20 years. That was a good time. But that was my first conference talk, Chicago Roboto in 2018. And after my talk, later that evening was Gwen Tudao. I think she's also a GDE, but she runs like she's done a few Android podcasts, used to do Android dialogue stuff. Anyway, she sent me a message that was like, great job on your first talk. You know, you did so well, something like that. And like, she did not have to send me that message, but like, after I was so nervous and really struggling, like that meant so much to me. And like, I take that, and like, if I'm ever at a conference and someone mentions that it's their first talk, I will go out of my way afterwards to say like, great job, you know, like, cause I know like that can just mean such a big difference. It kind of goes back to the role model thing. Like we almost have a responsibility now to like help the people who are trying to get into the community, you know, and show them like, hey, I'm not some stuck up person that you can't talk to, but I'm actually willing to help you. I remember, so my very first another story to this, my very first DroidCon, one of the speakers that really inspired me was Sam Edwards. He gave this talk on like screenshot testing, and I ended up doing like kind of an extension of that talk as my first one because I thought it was really interesting. But a few years ago, we were both at a DroidCon together, and he was giving a talk on the second day. So like the first night, we were back at the hotel, we had grabbed Taco Bell, and but he wanted me to review his slides for him. And I'm like, you're the person who inspired me to do this, and now you trust me to like help you? Like, I was like, we've come full circle here. Like, I don't feel like I am in a position to help you. Like, I'm learning from you. It's very weird. It still kind of messes with my brain a little bit.
Oh man. Just realized that we're kind of like 10 minutes over time, so we should probably wrap it up.
But it was worth
we got caught in the discussion here,
as
we tend to do. No surprise. So, Ivan, wrap up. Do the wrap up.
Yeah, do the wrap. So, wrap up. If you want a keychain, if you want to support us, check out the merch store. If you want to support us for free, it's easy as well. You can connect your Amazon account to your Twitch account, and you will see that on Twitch you have a toggle that says free Prime, and you can subscribe for 1 month for free to our channel. Downside, you will need to resubscribe, but usually you can do it live, so you can also share that you are a subscriber live in the chat. So we will remember you, don't worry. Thank you for also being a Ko-fi supporter. All of you, if you want to support us on a monthly basis on Ko-fi, please check the link in the description. And again, Adam, thank you for being with us.
It's been great chatting, and as always,
Thank
we
you,
end up with
Getty. Yes,
Hey,
Berlin
Kenny.
droid. Yes, I summoned him. I summoned him.
You said Seabase too many times.
Oh yeah, I summoned him. Okay, thank you for the support.
And yeah, so we are off next week because I am off next week. Finally vacation. Oh man, I'm counting down the minutes left until I leave.
Yeah, but don't forget to ask us for a discount code for Droidgo Berlin. If you want it, just reach out on Twitch, on YouTube, or on Twitter or X. No, I will never call it X. His mama
Twitter.
called him Twitter, and I'm gonna call him Twitter. But again, just let us know, and you can probably save some money. We have a stream in a couple of weeks, and then we are off for summer.
Yeah, so we have Rahul in 2 weeks because we're doing more profiling. More profiling.
Rahul, more stuff that I will never understand.
Yes, but
that's a
very interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, but that's very also colorful. I enjoy the
perfetto traces.
The perfetto trace is so colorful. It's like, oh yeah, look at that. I'm 5. Basically, I'm 5 years old.
And I think the following week we're supposed to have someone, but they just realized that they're on vacation. So we don't know who's gonna come. We'll figure it out. Maybe nobody.
Sure.
Who knows? Cool. And then I think that is the last. Yeah, that's the last session before the summer break. This year we're taking a bit longer of a summer break than last year, so we're starting in like early July and finishing in mid-September, with a caveat that it might just be end of September, depending if I have to travel for work in September or not. And
a long break.
We need a long break. It's been a very long and difficult year.
I feel the break is proportionally to our age.
Yeah, also that time is not making us any favors.
Jesus Christ. But yeah, I mean, we do what we can.
Yes, but we'll obviously still be active on our Telegram group if you folks want to join. That's a great place to hang out. It's mostly shit posting. So
do you really need something else?
I mean, we do shit posting, we complain about stuff. The usual.
It's a coping mechanism. It's not a Telegram group, it's a coping mechanism.
It's free therapy or something.
Yes. Oh man.
Folks, thank you very much. Adam, thank you again for being with us, and see you all soon enough. Bye bye.